Danger might be closer than you think. Before we begin, like this video, comment where and what time you're watching from, and subscribe for more chilling stories. Now turn off the lights, get comfortable, and let's dive into the unknown. This happened about 4 years ago during a trip I took with 3 childhood friends. We had rented a car and hit the road without much planning, just driving aimlessly, stopping in small towns, sleeping in cheap motels, and trying to make the most of that temporary freedom. That night, we must have already been driving for about 7 hours straight. We were tired but still laughing at nonsense and singing along to the car's playlist. The plan was to find a gas station and grab some energy drinks before continuing on the road for a few more hours. When we finally spotted one of those small roadside rest stops, the place looked deserted. There was a dirty bathroom, a public drinking fountain, and a row of vending machines under the yellowish glow of a street lamp. I parked near the entrance, and we got out to stretch our legs. The air was humid and carried that characteristic smell of hot asphalt cooling after a stuffy day. That's when I saw him for the first time. A man standing next to the vending machines, completely motionless. He was tall and thin, wearing a dark coat that seemed slightly too big for his body. It was hard to see his face clearly under the dim lighting, but you could tell that his skin was very pale, and his eyes were deeply set, almost sunk into darkness. The strangest thing, however, was the way he stood there, not moving, not even seeming to notice our presence. He wasn't looking at the machines, the road, or us. He was simply staring into nothingness, as if frozen in time. We stayed there for a few minutes, each of us occupied with something. A friend went to the bathroom, another grabbed a soda from the vending machine, and I filled my bottle at the fountain. But the whole time I kept watching that man, waiting for him to move, scratch his nose, shift his position, anything. But he did nothing, didn't even blink. I swear. At first I tried to ignore it. Maybe he was just tired, maybe he was simply lost in his own thoughts. But as the minutes passed, the feeling of discomfort only grew stronger. My friend Lucas, who always made jokes about everything, also noticed. He nudged my arm and whispered, "Dude, that guy's weird, isn't he even breathing?" We laughed awkwardly, but it was that kind of nervous laughter, the kind that escapes when something inside you already knows something is wrong. My friend Julia returned from the bathroom, and when she saw our expressions, she asked what was going on. We discreetly pointed to the guy. She frowned and stared for a few seconds before murmuring, "Is he alive?" The way she spoke sent chills down my spine, because until that moment, none of us had actually stopped to think about it. We decided not to stay there any longer. The discomfort had already become a kind of silent tension among us, as if we were all waiting for something to happen. We quickly grabbed our things and started heading back to the car. That's when Lucas, perhaps trying to lighten the mood, decided to do something stupid. As he walked past the man, he waved and said, "Good evening, buddy." The silence that followed was absolute. No response, no reaction, nothing. But I swear, at that instant, I felt the air become heavier, as if the very space around that man had changed density. We got into the car as fast as possible. I started the engine and glanced into the rearview mirror, waiting, perhaps hoping, to finally see the man move, maybe continue on his way, do anything to prove he was just a strange traveler. But no, he was still there, exactly the same, like a forgotten statue at that roadside stop. I shifted gear and drove off, without looking back. At least that's what we thought. The road was dark and the silence inside the car felt strange, heavy. No one spoke a word until Julia finally broke the ice. That was bizarre, right? I mean, he looked dead, but standing. Nobody disagreed. I tried to focus on driving, to keep my mind away from what we had just seen, but something wouldn't let me relax. It was as if an invisible thread still connected us to that place, as if something had latched onto us. It was Lucas who noticed first. He was sitting in the back seat and suddenly cursed, pulling Julia's arm to grab her attention. "Did you guys see that?" We looked back and my heart practically froze in my chest. At the side of the road, just a few meters from where we were, there he was, the man. Not at the rest stop, but now there, standing on the shoulder, watching us as the car passed by. I stepped on the accelerator without thinking twice. The car jerked forward slightly and Julia let out a muffled scream. "How did he get there?" she asked. but nobody had an answer. There was no way. The rest stop had been left behind at least 5 minutes ago, and we hadn't seen any cars following us, not a single soul alive on the road. He couldn't have run there. It was impossible. Yet there he was, standing, facing our direction, his face still hidden in the shadows of the night. The silence inside the car became unbearable. Nobody wanted to look back again. It felt as if we were all afraid that the next time we looked, he'd be closer. My mind struggled to find rational explanations. Maybe it was an illusion, a trick of light and shadow. Perhaps our minds were playing tricks on us because we were already scared. But deep down, I knew that wasn't it. That man was there, and he was watching us. I kept my foot on the accelerator, my heart pounding in my chest. No one said a word, but I could feel the fear in the car, as if it were sticking to the air itself. I glanced quickly into the rearview mirror, and for a split second, almost lost control of the steering wheel. He was still there, but now, closer, much closer. It was as if with every blink he advanced without needing to actually move. His body remained motionless, rigid, but it felt as though the road itself was pulling him toward us. "Stop the car," Lucas shouted, but I knew it was the worst possible idea. Something inside me screamed that if we stopped, it would be the end. Julia began to quietly sob in the passenger seat, covering her face with her hands. "He can't be here. He can't." I tried to think of something, anything, some kind of solution, but my brain was locked in pure terror. I'd never experienced a fear so visceral, so deep. It wasn't ordinary fear. It was something primal, as if we were facing something we shouldn't see, something that wasn't human. I accelerated even more, the car engine roaring loudly on the empty road. Darkness seemed to swallow us, and every passing sign was a blur amidst my desperation. My only thought was getting out of there as fast as possible. But the problem was, I didn't know exactly what we were running from. How do you escape something that doesn't move, yet somehow keeps getting closer? My breathing was ragged. My fingers gripped the steering wheel so tightly they began to hurt. "Don't look back," I said, my voice trembling, but it was too late. Lucas let out a strangled scream. Julia covered her mouth with her hands, stifling a sob. Instinct forced me to glance quickly into the mirror again, and that's when I saw him, the man, not on the shoulder, not distant, but right there, right behind the car, on the road, standing as always, but somehow matching our speed. His face, now visible under the weak glow of the taillights, held no expression whatsoever. No anger, no curiosity, just that fixed, dead stare. My chest felt like it was going to explode. I wanted to scream, but my throat was frozen. All I could do was keep my eyes on the road and pray that somehow it would just stop. "Go faster, man! Faster!" Lucas shouted, but I was already pushing the car to its limit. If I went any faster, we risked losing control and flipping over in the middle of nowhere. And honestly, part of me felt that no matter how fast we went, he would still be there. Julia began praying softly between sobs, clutching her seatbelt as if it could protect her. That's when we saw the lights. A gas station, farther up the road. Small, but real. A chance. "Pull over there. There," she pleaded. Without thinking, I sharply swerved the car onto the shoulder, pulling into the illuminated parking lot. The car skidded slightly before stopping. And then, silence. We stayed inside the car, breathing heavily, not daring to look back. The engine still purred quietly, and the gas station lights cast an orange glow through the windshield. Gradually, I mustered the courage and moved my eyes to the rearview mirror. Nothing. The man wasn't there anymore. Just the empty road, stretching into infinite darkness. My chest rose and fell rapidly, and I didn't know whether to laugh with relief or remain terrified. Lucas was the first to open the door. He almost stumbled out, looking around as if expecting that man to appear from some hidden corner. Julia was still crying, but now out of sheer relief. "Is he gone?" she asked with a choked voice. I didn't know how to answer, because even though we couldn't see anything there, the fear was still with us, as if something invisible was still watching us. We gradually got out of the car, as if any sudden movement might bring the man back. The gas station seemed like an oasis in the middle of nowhere, with its fluorescent lights flickering and a sleepy attendant behind the counter. We went inside without saying anything, without looking back. The smell of stale coffee and gasoline filled the air, and for the first time that night, I felt safe, or almost. The attendant, an older man with a gray mustache and the expression of someone who'd seen everything, watched us with a mix of curiosity and concern. "You folks all right?" he asked, narrowing his eyes. Lucas tried to laugh, but it came out more like a nervous sigh. "We just saw something weird on the road." The man tilted his head, as if he knew exactly what we were talking about. He took a deep breath before saying, "Let me guess." A man standing by the side of the road didn't move, just watched. The air grew heavy again. My heart, which had begun slowing down, started pounding once more in my chest. Julia stared at the attendant with wide eyes. How do you know?" Her voice came out almost as a whisper. The man sighed, grabbing a dirty cloth to wipe the counter, as if he'd told this story many times before. "You're not the first ones who've seen him. And if you want my advice, keep driving without looking back. Forget this ever happened." Lucas let out a short, humorless laugh. "And who the hell is he?" The attendant paused for a moment, as if carefully weighing his words before answering. "Nobody knows. Some say he's a spirit trapped on the road, others think he's something worse. But there's one thing everyone who passes through here agrees on. He only appears to those who've already been marked." He stared at us for a long moment. "And now you're marked." A chill ran down my spine. "Marked?" I repeated, my voice sounding weak even to myself. The attendant merely nodded, tossing the cloth onto the counter. "It always happens the same way. People stop at the roadside station, see him, and when they leave, he follows, always watching, but he never attacks. At least, not yet." The casual way he said it made my stomach churn. He spoke as if we were doomed to something we didn't even understand. Julia gripped my arm tightly. I could feel her fingers trembling. "And how do we get rid of this?" she asked, her voice thick with fear. The attendant shrugged. "You can pray, if you believe in that sort of thing. You can try to forget, but as far as I know, nobody really forgets." He took a toothpick and started chewing it slowly, as if the matter were already closed. "Just keep going and hope he doesn't find you again." We left the gas station in silence, the smell of gasoline and stale coffee still clinging to our clothes. When we got back into the car, no one wanted to sit in the back seat. Even Lucas, who always joked about everything, preferred to squeeze himself between me and Julia up front. The road seemed darker now, as if the night had grown denser after what we'd heard. My fingers trembled on the steering wheel as I started the engine, but I shifted into gear and we continued on. The tension was palpable. None of us dared to look in the rearview mirror. I kept my eyes fixed firmly on the road, feeling a tight knot in my stomach, waiting, no, praying, that it was all over. We drove for hours until we finally reached a larger city, where we found a motel to spend the night. Nobody slept properly. Every shadow cast by the street lamp on the window seemed shaped like a standing man. Every noise outside made us hold our breath, but the night passed, and somehow, nothing happened. In the morning, the sunlight felt less comforting than it should have. The brightness didn't chase away that strange feeling that something was wrong, that something was still watching us, invisible, waiting for the right moment to reappear. Julia suggested we drive straight home with no more stops, no detours. None of us disagreed. We simply packed our things, refueled the car, and got back on the road without looking back. We drove all day, without joking, without music, without anything to break the heavy silence filling the car. The paranoia was still there, like a shadow in the corners of our minds. I constantly glanced at the mirrors, expecting to see that figure standing on the roadside again. But I didn't. None of us did. And when we finally arrived home late that night, I locked myself in my room and slept with the lights on for the first time in years. Days passed, and gradually life returned to normal. We tried not to talk about it. We tried to act as if it had been just some collective delusion caused by the exhaustion from the trip. But deep down, all of us knew it wasn't just that. There was something real on that road, something that had seen us, and for some reason had chosen us. For a while, we avoided driving at night, avoided even looking at people standing alone on the street. The fear never completely disappeared. It only went dormant. Then, a few weeks ago, something happened. I was driving alone, returning home late from work. It was an urban area, busy, filled with lights and cars. I felt safe. But then, at a traffic light, I distractedly glanced at the rearview mirror, and my heart stopped. On the sidewalk, motionless among people rushing by, stood a man. Tall, thin, wearing a dark coat. He wasn't walking, wasn't blending into the crowd. He was just there, standing, looking straight at me. My entire body went cold. I wanted to believe it was just some random stranger, a coincidence, but deep down, I knew. It was him, the same man from the road, the same empty gaze, the same suffocating silence around him. The light turned green, and I sped off without hesitation, feeling my chest tighten as if it were being crushed. During the drive home, I didn't check the mirror again. I just kept driving, praying that when I got home, he wouldn't be there. Since that night, I haven't seen him again. But the feeling remains. The fear of glancing into the mirror and seeing that expressionless face standing, watching me. Sometimes I feel like he never truly went away. He's just waiting for the right moment to show himself again. I just hope that when it happens, I'll still have somewhere to run. Story 2. This happened in autumn last year, when my boyfriend Diego and I decided to spend a weekend camping in a national park far from the city. The idea was to escape the hustle, disconnect for a bit, and enjoy nature. We chose a very isolated spot, away from the more popular trails, where we could enjoy tranquility without being disturbed. That morning, very early, we decided to explore the surroundings. The sun had barely risen in the sky and the air was still cold, with that damp smell of earth and dry leaves. The trail was narrow and wound among tall trees, creating tunnels of shadow and light as we walked. We spoke softly, listening to the sound of our footsteps crushing leaves along the way. That's when we saw the woman. She was running in the opposite direction, a light and steady jog, her face relaxed. She wore dark sports clothes and a band holding her hair back. As she passed us, we exchanged that polite greeting, a quick wave, a half smile. She returned it with a brief nod and continued on, disappearing among the trees just seconds later. We didn't pay much attention at the time. Although isolated, the park was still a public place. It made sense that there might be other campers or visitors around. We continued our walk for a while before returning to the campsite, preparing a simple lunch on our portable stove and relaxing under the shade of a large tree. The day passed slowly, and around 3 in the afternoon, we decided to stop by the ranger station to get some information about the trail we planned to explore the following day. The station was a small wooden cabin with a counter and some maps hanging on the wall. The ranger who attended us was an older man with a serious expression, wearing a worn uniform and a faded green cap. While talking, I mentioned the woman we had seen running in the morning, commenting on how unusual it seemed for someone to be there so early. The ranger frowned, giving us a puzzled look. "What woman?" he asked. I explained further, described her appearance, but his expression only grew more serious. "Are you sure? Because as far as I know, you're the only people camping here this weekend." I felt a chill run down my neck. "What do you mean, the only ones?" I asked, trying to laugh, hoping he was mistaken. The ranger shrugged and pointed at an open notebook on the counter. "We keep a record of everyone who enters the park, especially this time of year. Aside from you two, no one else came camping this week. No car has passed through the entrance gate since Tuesday." I looked at Diego, expecting him to have a rational explanation, but he just swallowed hard, visibly uncomfortable. We tried to argue. We described the encounter, the way the woman seemed completely normal, the quick wave before she disappeared down the trail. But the ranger didn't seem convinced. "If you really saw someone, she shouldn't be here," he said, his tone leaving me uneasy. "The forest is big. There are things we can't explain." He stared at us for a long moment before adding, "If I were you, I wouldn't wander around after sunset." We left the ranger station without exchanging a word. The silence between Diego and me was heavy, as if anything we said might make everything even more real. When we returned to our campsite, the sun was already starting to dip toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange. But instead of enjoying the view as we usually would, the only thing I could think about was the woman. If she hadn't entered the park, how had we seen her? Diego tried to lighten the mood. "Maybe she entered by another trail without passing through the main gate," he suggested as he prepared the campfire. I nodded, but something didn't fit. The park was vast, surrounded by kilometers of dense forest. Who would cross all that just to run alone at dawn? As we ate, I tried to ignore the tightness in my chest, convincing myself that we were just letting our imaginations run wild. But deep down, something told me that the night still had more answers to reveal. Night fell quickly, bringing with it the oppressive silence of the forest. The only thing breaking the darkness was the orange glow of our campfire, casting flickering shadows onto the surrounding trees. Diego attempted to make conversation, even told a joke or two, but it was clear that he was also restless. After some time, we decided it was best to turn in. We put out the fire, got into the tent, and lay down side by side, listening to the sounds of the woods. I fell asleep quickly, the fatigue from the hike weighing heavily on my eyelids. But at some point in the middle of the night, I suddenly woke up without any apparent reason. I stayed perfectly still, trying to understand what had awoken me. That's when I heard it. Footsteps. Not heavy, not random like those of an animal sniffing around the campsite. They were light, rhythmic, as if someone were running. A steady jog circling around our tent. My heart started pounding in my chest. I held my breath, listening carefully. The footsteps weren't hurried or hesitant, nor did they blend with the rustling of leaves or typical forest sounds. They were regular, almost mechanical, as if someone were running in circles around our tent. I swallowed hard and lightly touched Diego's arm, who was sleeping next to me. He stirred, mumbled something, but then he heard it too, and he went completely still. "Do you hear that?" he whispered, his voice tense. I only managed to nod, even knowing he couldn't see me in the darkness of the tent. The footsteps continued, never stopping, never hesitating. My blood ran cold when I realized the rhythm was identical to that of the woman we had seen in the morning. The same cadence, the same light jog, but it made no sense. It was the middle of the night. Who the hell would be running here in the middle of nowhere? Diego grabbed my wrist tightly, as if he wanted to stop me from making any sudden movements. "Stay quiet," he whispered, his tone serious, unlike any other time I'd heard fear in his voice. The footsteps continued, as though whoever it was were tracing a perfect circle around the tent, neither slowing nor accelerating. There was no sound of breathing, nothing except the rhythmic contact of soles hitting the earth. It was as if whatever it was didn't tire, as if it was something programmed to run, forever. With each lap I hoped it would stop, that it would leave, but it didn't. Time passed. Minutes, hours, I don't know, and the footsteps remained constant like a macabre metronome. Diego swallowed hard. "We need to look," he murmured, but I gripped his arm firmly. "What if it's not human?" My question hung in the air. He didn't respond, because deep down we both knew the answer wasn't good. Time seemed to drag on. The noise of the footsteps never changed, never hesitated. It was as if that thing knew exactly what it was doing, keeping us there, trapped inside the tent, too terrified to leave. My chest rose and fell rapidly, and my mind raced through 1,000 possibilities, none of which made sense. Who would keep running in the middle of the forest for so long? And why around our tent? Then, suddenly, the footsteps stopped. The silence that followed was even worse than the constant sound of the jog. I couldn't even hear the crickets or the rustling leaves. It was as if the entire forest was holding its breath along with us. Diego slowly moved, trying to reach the tent zipper. I wanted to stop him, wanted to scream for him not to do it, but before I could say anything, something scraped against the tent fabric right beside me. My entire body froze. My breath caught in my throat and an overwhelming chill ran down my spine. The sound wasn't loud, but it was clear, as if something had slowly run a hand, or maybe a fingernail, across the thin material of the tent. Diego froze instantly as well. I could feel his tension next to me, his muscles rigid, his breathing shallow. Outside, nothing. No sound, no footsteps, just the suffocating silence of the forest. Then came the worst part, a gentle, almost imperceptible tug at the fabric, as if someone were testing the tent. My heart raced. I wanted to scream, run, do anything, but all I managed was to squeeze my eyes shut and pray for it to end. Diego grabbed my hand, and in that moment, I understood he was just as terrified as I was. We stayed like that, completely motionless, waiting, until suddenly the footsteps started again. But this time, they were moving away. The footsteps gradually faded, blending back into the natural sounds of the forest, which slowly seemed to return. Only when nothing remained but the wind rustling the leaves did Diego finally move. He carefully pulled the zipper of the tent, opening it just enough to peek outside. I held my breath, expecting the worst. But all we saw was the trail illuminated by moonlight and the forest gently swaying in the breeze. No footprints, no signs anyone had been there. It was as if it had never happened. We slowly stepped outside, still afraid something might be waiting for us. But the clearing was empty. No shadows among the trees, no strange movements, just the uncomfortable silence of a place that moments earlier had seemed haunted. Diego turned to me, his expression serious. "We're leaving now," he said, and I didn't even argue. We began packing up the camp as quickly as possible, throwing things carelessly into our backpacks, never looking back. Something had been watching us that night, and we weren't staying 1 second longer to find out what it was. We drove nonstop until dawn, the car slicing through the empty road as the sky began to lighten. Neither of us spoke for a long time. The silence inside the car was almost as suffocating as it had been in the forest that night. I tried to process what had happened, but the only thing my mind could replay was the sound of those footsteps. Constant, mechanical, impossible. When we finally arrived home, Diego turned off the engine and let out a long sigh, running his hands over his face. "We're never going back there again," he said, and I just nodded. Since that day, we've never gone camping again, never returned to such isolated trails. But sometimes, late at night, when everything is quiet, I think I can hear it. A distant rhythmic sound, like a gentle jog on an empty street. And I wonder, did we really leave it behind? Story 3. This happened about 2 years ago, when I was driving alone across the country for work. My plan was to cross 3 states in 1 week, and since I didn't want to spend much money, I decided to stay in roadside motels along the way. That night, it was already past midnight when I found a cheap and run-down place beside a deserted highway. The neon sign flickered as if about to go out forever, and the parking lot was almost empty. But I was too exhausted to be picky. I entered the reception area, and the woman behind the counter looked as tired as I was. While filling out the paperwork, she barely raised her eyes from the computer screen. She handed me the key to room 107 and murmured a sleepy, "Good night." I took my bag, walked down the narrow hallway, and arrived at the door to my room. The place was exactly what I expected. Old furniture, a moldy smell, and a dim yellowish light too weak to illuminate the corners. But all I wanted was sleep. I locked the door, tossed my suitcase into a corner, checked the closet and bathroom out of habit, and threw myself onto the bed. Within minutes, I was fast asleep. I woke up suddenly, unsure exactly why. The room was plunged into darkness, and for a moment I thought I might still be dreaming. But then I heard it. Voices. Low whispers, as if 2 or more people were having a conversation right there inside the room. My heart raced. I kept my eyes open, motionless on the bed, trying to understand where the sound was coming from. It was muffled, almost indistinct, but definitely close. Far too close. I fumbled in the darkness until I found the bedside lamp and clicked it on. The faint light filled the room, casting shadows on the old furniture. But there was no one there. The room was exactly as I'd left it. My gaze stopped at the closet door, which was now slightly ajar. I clearly remembered closing it before going to sleep. Yet there it was, partially open, as if it had been touched, as if someone had come out from inside. I swallowed hard, feeling a chill run down my spine. I forced myself to get up, even though the heaviness of fear kept me glued to the bed. Each step toward the closet seemed more difficult than it should have been, as if the very air around me had grown denser. I reached out my hand, and with a quick motion, swung the door wide open. Nothing. Just an empty space, with a solitary hanger gently swaying, as if someone had just disturbed it. I slammed the closet shut, trying to control my rapid breathing. Perhaps I was just tired. Perhaps I'd only dreamed those voices. I convinced myself of that and returned to bed, leaving the lamp on this time. But as soon as I lay down and closed my eyes, I heard it again. A whisper, so close to my ear that I felt an icy chill travel up my neck. Only this time I understood what it said. "You shouldn't be here. My throat instantly went dry. I jumped out of bed so quickly I almost tripped over the worn-out rug. The room looked exactly the same. Old furniture, dim lighting, nothing out of place. But I knew what I'd heard. It wasn't imagination. It wasn't the wind. Someone or something had whispered that to me. Slowly, I turned around, scanning the room with my eyes, my heart pounding against my ribs. That's when I noticed something that hadn't been there before. On the dusty mirror next to the TV, there was a mark, as if someone had dragged their hand across the dirty glass. 4 long, trembling fingers, drawn into the accumulated dust. My legs felt weak. I was alone in the room, or at least, that's what was supposed to be true. I didn't want to stay there a second longer. I hastily grabbed my things, hardly bothering to pack properly. Every second in that room seemed to stretch, as if something invisible was waiting for me to hesitate. As I made my way to the door, a chilling thought occurred to me. What if, when I looked back, I saw someone watching me from the closet? Fear made me quicken my pace. I twisted the knob and pulled the door open forcefully, immediately feeling relief as I stepped into the brightly lit hallway. The air outside the room felt lighter, more real. I hurried toward reception, where the sleepy night shift woman still sat behind the counter. When she saw me, she raised an eyebrow. "Checking out early?" she asked, giving me a curious glance. I took a deep breath, still trembling slightly, and simply nodded. But then, without thinking, I blurted out, "Room 107. Is there something wrong with it?" The receptionist sighed and looked away for a moment, as if deciding what to say. Then she shrugged as if it wasn't really a secret anymore. "We don't usually rent out that room," she said, fiddling absently with some keys on the counter. "But last night we were full and you arrived late, so, well, I thought it wouldn't matter." My stomach sank. "Why?" I asked, noticing my own voice trembling. She hesitated for a moment before continuing. "Some people say it's still occupied." The casual way she said that made my skin crawl even more. "There was a guy who lived there for a while, years ago. He never checked out, if you know what I mean." She gave me a meaningful look. "Not everyone notices something strange, but the ones who do never want to spend another night there." My heart was pounding. I wanted to ask more. I wanted to understand exactly what had happened in that room, but something inside me was screaming to just leave. I grabbed my belongings and walked out without looking back, feeling the receptionist's eyes following me as I crossed the empty parking lot. When I got into the car and slammed the door shut, I felt immediate relief, as if I'd finally left something behind. But the fear wasn't over yet. Before starting the engine, I instinctively glanced back at the motel building. My hands tightly gripped the steering wheel, and my chest rose and fell with quick breaths. That's when I saw it. In the window of room 107, right in the corner, a dark figure stood motionless, watching me. I couldn't see a face or details, only a presence, an emptiness shaped like someone who should never have been there. I stepped on the accelerator and got away from there as fast as I could. Since that night, I've never stayed in another roadside motel, and every time I pass one, I wonder how many rooms are still occupied. Story 4. When we moved into that house, I thought it would be a perfect new beginning for our family. My wife Camila, our daughter Sophia, and I would finally have a larger space, a quiet neighborhood, clean streets, and friendly neighbors. After years of living in cramped apartments, this house felt like a dream. We spent the first day unpacking boxes, arranging furniture, and exploring every corner of our new home. At night, exhausted, we finally lay down, ready for our first night's sleep in the new house. I woke up in the middle of the night for no apparent reason. The neighborhood was almost completely silent, something unusual for someone coming from the big city. Unable to sleep, I decided to go to the kitchen for a glass of water. As I walked through the living room, something in the window caught my attention. The movement was subtle, but enough to make me stop. I looked outside and felt a chill run down my spine. Standing on the sidewalk, right at the driveway entrance of the house directly across from ours, was a man, completely motionless, and staring directly at our house. I stood there frozen, trying to understand what I was seeing. The man didn't look like a neighbor coming home late at night, nor someone waiting for a rideshare. He stood motionless in a way that didn't seem natural, upright, arms hanging at his sides like a statue forgotten at the driveway's entrance. The darkness made it difficult to see his face, but I could sense that he was looking directly at me. For some reason, my instincts told me not to move. I just watched, expecting him to do something, maybe move slightly, light a cigarette, anything to make him seem human. But he remained there, rigid, as if time didn't pass for him. After a few minutes, I slowly closed the curtain, trying to ignore the chill on the back of my neck. Maybe he was just a strange neighbor waiting for someone. I'll ask around in the morning. With that thought, I returned to bed, but sleep didn't come easily. The next morning, as I was having coffee on the porch, I saw a gray-haired gentleman leaving the house next door. He seemed friendly, so I took the opportunity. I approached him, and after a quick greeting, casually asked, "Do you know who lives in the house across the street? I saw a man standing in the driveway last night. Looked like he was waiting for someone." The neighbor's smile vanished immediately. He frowned and glanced toward where I pointed. "In that place? Nobody's lived there for months." My stomach sank. "Are you sure?" I insisted. "I saw someone there last night." The neighbor slowly shook his head. "I'm sure. The owners moved away at the beginning of the year. The house has been empty since then. If you saw someone there, well, I don't know who it could be." He seemed uncomfortable with the topic and quickly changed the subject, wishing me a good day before heading back inside his house. I stood there for a few seconds, staring at the empty house. Had I imagined everything? The day passed without incident. I tried to convince myself that my mind was playing tricks, perhaps a shadow, or maybe a strange reflection. But as night fell again, that uncomfortable feeling returned. I didn't want to look out the window, but something inside told me I had to. So just before midnight, with all the lights in the house turned off, I went to the living room and pulled the curtain aside just enough to peek out. My blood froze. He was there again, exactly in the same spot. But this time something was different. He wasn't looking at the house anymore. Now he was facing directly toward me, toward the living room window. Even in the darkness, I could feel the intensity of that stare, even though I couldn't see his eyes. My heart was pounding so hard it seemed to echo throughout the room. I wanted to close the curtain immediately, but I couldn't move. Something told me that if I did, he might come closer. I stood there, frozen, gripping the curtain with trembling fingers. The man remained motionless, as if he knew I was watching. The silence was suffocating. My legs wanted to run, but my mind was paralyzed with pure dread. Then, slowly, without moving any other muscle, he tilted his head to the side. It was a small movement, but enough to set off every alarm inside me. I released the curtain on impulse and stumbled backward, feeling my heart hammering against my chest. I took a deep breath, trying to figure out what to do. Call the police? And say what exactly? That a man was standing in front of an empty house? He hadn't done anything. But I knew with every fiber of my being that something was wrong. Even so, I forced myself back to the bedroom. I lay down beside Camilla and tried to sleep, but fear kept me awake for hours until eventually, exhausted, I finally drifted off. I woke with a start in the middle of the night, with that strange sensation of being watched. The room was dark, and the entire house was silent, but somehow I already knew. I knew he was still there. I turned slowly toward the bedroom window. The curtain was slightly open, and through a narrow gap I could see the street illuminated by the faint glow of the streetlights. And then, I saw him. He was no longer standing at the entrance of the empty house. Now, he stood directly facing my bedroom, motionless, rigidly positioned exactly as before, staring straight at the window, straight at me. My body froze and an icy chill ran down my spine. There was no way this was a coincidence. He knew I was looking. He wanted me to see him. I wanted to scream, "Wake Camilla, do anything," but my body wouldn't respond. Everything inside me warned that if I looked away, something worse would happen. So I stayed there, frozen, just breathing deeply and hoping desperately that none of it was real. But then he moved. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, as if merely shifting his weight, but enough for me to understand that he wasn't an illusion. My breath grew shallow, and the only thing I managed to do was reach out and yank the curtain closed in one swift motion, completely covering the window. The room plunged back into darkness, and silence once again became absolute. But I couldn't relax. Fear was embedded in my skin, and my entire body was tense, waiting. Was he still out there? Had he come closer? For what felt like an eternity, I listened, straining to hear any sound, any sign that he hadn't left. The rest of the night dragged on endlessly. I didn't sleep. I lay there hearing every creak of the house, every whisper of wind outside, waiting for something to happen. But nothing came. When the first ray of sunlight broke through the window, I finally gathered the courage to peek outside. With my heart pounding, I gently moved the curtain aside just a little. The street was empty. The man had vanished. That morning, I made a decision without a second thought. I talked to Camilla and suggested we move. She didn't fully understand, but it didn't take much to convince her. Within a month, we were already in another house in another neighborhood, far away from there. I never saw that man again. But sometimes, late at night, I still wake up with that same feeling, as if someone is standing in the darkness watching me. And I wonder, did he stay on that street? Or did he follow me? Story 5. I've always enjoyed hiking alone. It's the kind of experience that forces you to be completely present, aware of the trail, nature, and yourself. Last year, I decided to face a bigger challenge, a 3-day hike through a mountain range known for its breathtaking views and isolation. It was a well-marked but demanding route, and since I went outside the high season, I knew I wouldn't encounter many people along the way. That was exactly what I wanted. The first day went smoothly. The weather was nice, and I moved at a comfortable pace. In the mid-afternoon, while climbing a steeper stretch, I spotted another hiker coming from the opposite direction. He wore a bright red jacket, something hard to miss among the dense vegetation. As we crossed paths, we exchanged a nod and continued our separate ways without speaking. A perfectly normal encounter. Nothing unusual. At least, that's what I thought at the time. I continued hiking for a few more hours, focused on the uneven terrain and the weight of my backpack. The sun was already beginning to set when I stopped to drink water and look around. That's when I noticed something that made my stomach sink. Just ahead, off the trail, among the trees, stood a man. Not just any man. The same one in the red jacket. He wasn't walking, nor did he appear lost. He was simply standing there, half hidden among the branches, looking toward the trail. My first instinct was to find a logical explanation. Maybe it was someone else, another hiker with a similar jacket. But deep down, I knew it was him. Same height, same posture. Yet something was different now. He wasn't following a path. He was watching me. I pretended not to notice him. I didn't want to give him the satisfaction of knowing I'd seen him. I forced myself to keep walking, heart racing, trying to ignore the cold chill crawling up my neck. Maybe it was a coincidence. Maybe he had changed directions and taken a shortcut. But something inside me said otherwise. I could feel his eyes on me, even after I could no longer see him among the trees. I kept walking until I found a safe spot to set up camp. I chose an open area, far enough from the trees so no one could hide nearby without me noticing. I pitched the tent, started a small fire, and tried to relax. The isolation, usually something I valued during these trips, now made me feel vulnerable. Then by pure instinct, I looked up toward the mountain. My blood ran cold. Up at the crest of the hill, silhouetted against the darkening sky, was the man in the red jacket, motionless, watching. This time, my whole body reacted. My heart hammered so hard I could hear the blood pulsing in my ears. How had he gotten up there? I'd spent the entire day ascending, following the most direct trail to that point. There were no easy shortcuts, no quick routes that would allow him to pass me without being noticed. Yet somehow he was there, standing against the darkened sky, staring down at me. I forced myself to blink, to look away for a second and take a deep breath, convincing myself I was imagining things. But when I looked again, he was still there. There was no doubt. The firelight flickered against my tent, casting dancing shadows around me. But he remained motionless atop the hill, like a statue forgotten by time. Something inside screamed at me to pack up everything and leave immediately. But it was already dark, and the thought of walking alone through the night seemed even worse. I sat there by the fire, trying to ignore his presence. I tried convincing myself that if I didn't react, maybe he would go away. But fear was consuming me. I barely blinked, afraid that in the second I looked away, he might disappear, or worse, be closer. Time passed slowly and the night grew even quieter. No animal sounds, no strong wind, just the crackling of the fire and that invisible heaviness in the air, as if something was about to happen. After a while, I forced myself to enter the tent. I slowly closed the zipper, trying to feel safe inside that thin layer of fabric, but I couldn't relax. Every sound outside seemed amplified. Every snap in the bushes made my heart race. I took a deep breath and lay down, determined to at least try to sleep. But the instant I closed my eyes, I heard something that chilled me to the bone. Footsteps, slow, cautious, circling my campsite. The footsteps were soft but unmistakable. They came from different directions, as if someone was slowly walking around my tent, inspecting every detail of my camp. My breathing grew shallow. I forced myself to stay perfectly still, not making a single sound, as if that would keep me invisible. The thin fabric of the tent was the only barrier between me and whatever was outside. The fire was still burning, but its flickering glow didn't bring comfort. It only cast distorted shadows against the sides of the tent. Then, everything stopped. The silence became absolute, and for a brief moment, I thought maybe he'd gone away. But then came the worst part. A low, almost imperceptible sound, right by the tent entrance. Something breathing, slow and deep as if listening to me inside. My blood froze, and then, a slight pressure against the fabric, as if a hand had gently pressed on the outside, testing the thin barrier separating me from whatever was out there. I couldn't breathe. Every muscle in my body was locked, my heart hammering so loudly I swore he could hear it. The hand, if it even was a hand, slowly slid along the tent fabric, tracing a deliberate, precise movement, as if feeling its texture. I wanted to scream, wanted to grab my knife and run, but fear had paralyzed me completely. Then without warning, the sound stopped. No breathing, no movement, just the crushing silence of the night. I stayed like that for endless minutes, waiting. Whatever it was seemed to have gone away, or was simply waiting for me to come out. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. I curled up in the tent, gripping my knife tightly, ears alert to every sound. When the first ray of sunlight pierced through the tent fabric, I finally gathered the courage. I slowly opened the zipper, heart pounding. Outside, everything seemed normal, the forest untouched. But when I looked down, my stomach twisted. There were footprints around my tent, circling countless times, but they didn't come from anywhere, nor did they lead anywhere. My entire body went cold. The footprints were right there, clear in the soft earth, circling my tent as if someone had walked around it for hours. But there were no tracks showing where the person had come from, no signs indicating they had left. It was as if they'd simply appeared there. I looked around, my heart pounding, expecting to see the man in the red jacket standing among the trees or up on the hilltop, but he wasn't there. I didn't wait another second. I packed my things as fast as possible and started descending the trail without looking back. I'd never felt so vulnerable in my entire life. Every forest sound seemed like a warning. Every shadow seemed to hide something that shouldn't be there. When I finally reached the road and saw my car parked there, I let out a sigh of relief. But even as I drove away, a question kept repeating in my mind. If he saw me all along the trail, followed me without ever truly walking, had he already been waiting for me even before I arrived?